absolutely every person should be treating those around them justly and demanding equality. And if that happens, and if we're successful at doing that, then gender-based violence wouldn't happen. Poverty wouldn't happen. People not having access to water, that wouldn't happen, because we would have already solved those issues. So it's that whole thing about, like you can scratch yourself on a fence and put a plaster on, that's charity work. But justice work would be, where did you scratch yourself? Let's fix the fence and make sure no one is ever scratched again.
Hi everyone, welcome to MyEffect Today, bringing you candid conversations with young innovators who are taking action today to create meaningful social impact. I'm your host, Kelly Lavelle, and in this episode, we're talking about human rights with our special guest, Jessica Dewhurst. Jessica Dewhurst is an award-winning human rights defender from South Africa. She is founder and CEO of the international human rights organization, the Justice Desk, which focuses on educating, advocating, and equipping youth, government, civil society, and vulnerable groups across South Central Africa in human rights. They believe that by empowering ordinary people to understand and defend human rights, they can transform society in a sustainable way to create a more just and equal world.
So my name's Jess. I'm the founder of a non-profit organization. So we work across South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And what we do is we ultimately believe that the experts in the community as to what their issues are, but also how to solve it, are community members themselves. So what we do is we will train and educate and equip and empower local people in order to understand what their human rights are, but most importantly, to learn how to fight for their human rights. This is our 7th year. I think we turned 7 in June, and we're sitting at about 250,000 people who've gone through our projects. And we have 20 different projects across the 3 countries, and we just keep growing from there, which is quite cool.
It's amazing, and the work you're doing is like, it's on the ground. Like, it's not easy work by any means, and you've grown so much. My first question is, where did you find your passion for this? Like, how did you get started? And can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I started when I was really young. I think growing up as a white person living in South Africa. I was born in 92, which means 2 years before apartheid even ended. So apartheid was kind of the legal system within South Africa that oppressed anyone of color. So if you were white, you were great. If you're not white, no. You weren't allowed to be educated. You weren't allowed to get certain jobs. You weren't allowed to be in areas that white people were. So I really grew up in the time of Nelson Mandela, when Nelson Mandela was freed from Robben Island, where he came and became the first democratic president of South Africa. And everyone was talking about South Africa being the rainbow nation because it's so diverse, and South Africa is such an awesome country for overcoming apartheid. And I agreed with that, but I also really did see it in the communities itself. Predominantly white people are still the most powerful in South Africa. They still own more land, more companies, more wealth. And people are still in what we call townships, which are like slums. I mean, the average Black South African won't have access to things like water and electricity and quality education and safety. So even though we were talking about, all we have achieved as a country and how we're a rainbow nation, I didn't really see it being reflected in society. So what I decided to do is I got my first job at an NGO at 14, and then I started doing mostly charity-based work. But then I realized very quickly that we weren't actually solving any issues. We were feeding kids, but the same kids were hungry the next day. Or we'd give someone clothes, but then they'd eventually need to come back for more. So we weren't actually solving any issues. And that's when I realized that the only way we're actually going to make effective change is if we focus on human rights, if we focus on justice. We need to solve the problems so that no one ever has to experience it again. So like an example would be, if someone says, I'm hungry, we shouldn't just immediately respond in charity by giving them food, or that is really great. But we also need to start asking the questions, why is this person hungry in the first place? What kind of society has been allowed to exist that has led to certain people not having access to food? Because that's a human rights violation. So for us, it's about asking those really serious questions and trying to work at the people who are still oppressed today to make sure that they're protected. And yeah, so it's been a long journey. I don't even know how many years I've been doing this. But I can't picture myself doing anything else. I think as a white South African, I have a lot of privilege. And I think that because of that privilege, I must and I have to respond by serving and loving and using my privilege.
One of the things that you mentioned, I think, is so important to underscore and take a moment to focus on is you mentioned about going beyond finding the root cause of a problem or an issue that you see in your community. And I think that's a really, sounds like a simple, but it's a very profound approach and way of thinking, because it's not intuitive to us. A lot of individuals, when we look at solving community problems, we do kind of look at the surface layer of, okay, well, we're out of food, we need to do a food collection drive, or we look at it from that standpoint, and we don't consider, well, why does this keep reoccurring? How can we prevent this from happening in the first place? So we're in react mode instead of being able to find the root cause so we can respond and mitigate. And I think that's something that if we, as young change makers, it's something that we should really put more focus to is the whys. And one of my favorite quotes is, question the unquestioned answers in life, meaning sometimes we just accept things and it's like, this is just a reoccurring thing. It's just part of our life. And we don't just sit for a minute and ask, well, why? And why not change that? In your experience, how has that shaped your journey? Because out of all issues, human rights is definitely one of the most complex, and I would say that it's also one of the most challenging, because there's a lot of barriers and you have to deal with both like government and public sector as well as on the ground. So I would think that could be intimidating as a young person to try and want to address those issues when first starting out.
Well, for me, my personal belief and what I think is the case is that every single issue that this world is having right now, whether it's starvation, gender-based violence, sexism, xenophobia, whatever the situation is, I believe that those are only able to exist because we have societies where human rights are not protected. If human rights were protected, none of those issues would be there at all. So for me, the first and foremost thing that everyone should be doing is focusing on human rights and focusing on justice to make sure that people have these 30 incredible rights, because if they have it, they are guaranteed to live happy and healthy lives. And I think a lot of the time the world tries to make activism seem like a really bad thing and tries to make human rights seem like a really bad thing. Because the truth is they don't want people to engage in activism, and they don't want people to learn about their human rights, because if people knew about their human rights, we would demand them. And we would make sure that governments are actually keeping their promises in making countries that people can actually live happily in because they have access to their rights. But it's the whole thing, like half the fight is knowing what the issue is. And I think for a lot of people in the world, because we don't know what our human rights are, we don't hold our leaders accountable. And I think that that's what the leaders thrive on. They need us to be ignorant. They need us to not know what is going on, because then we will continue to let them do what they need to do, what they want to do, without being held accountable. So I do think it's intimidating, but I also don't, because I think that every single person in this planet, I believe, has goodness in them. And I think every single person, I believe, if something was happening to another person, would stand up and be like, hey, this is not okay. Or at least they would feel it in their heart and be like, this isn't okay. And for me, that means that human rights are natural. They come to us naturally. And they are things that are kind of ingrained in our very being. So I think being an activist, I mean, at the Justice Desk, we've kind of used this term called an everyday activist, which means, no, it's not the social workers and the lawyers who are going to change the world. Because if those were the people that are supposed to change the world, it would have happened by now. So for me, it's about recognizing that every single person has to be an everyday activist. So the mothers, the fathers, the kids, the street sweeper, the person who works at the grocery store. Absolutely every person should be treating those around them justly and demanding equality. And if that happens, and if we're successful at doing that, then gender-based violence wouldn't happen. Poverty wouldn't happen. People not having access to water, that wouldn't happen, because we would have already solved those issues. So it's that whole thing about, like, you can scratch yourself on a fence and put a plaster on, that's charity work. But justice work would be, where did you scratch yourself? Let's fix the fence and make sure no one is ever scratched again. And that is kind of what I want to do. I want to leave this world, and I want absolutely no one to remember me, and I want to just disappear. But what I want to do is leave the world in a place where our future generations will never have to worry about things like not accessing water, and something called starvation wouldn't be something that people really understand, because we would have solved those issues already. And I think that's what it comes down to. And anyone who does any work in communities, I always ask them, what's your agenda? Because if you want to solve this issue, then you have to be talking human rights. If you're not talking human rights, then you're just putting plasters on wounds, and you're not actually affecting and addressing the real problem here. So I would say any work, any developmental work that's happening around the world, any work where you want to try to make a difference in someone's lives, you have to use a human rights-based approach.
That's really important. And then you touched on two things there as well, and that was also the importance of education and awareness. Even as an individual, to your point, until you realize and are aware that someone else doesn't have the same privilege as you, or the same rights as you, all of these things, you kind of, and I don't feel like social media sometimes can be great for this, but it can also not be so great for it, because I feel sometimes we can create our bubbles of our networks and our communities. And if anything happens outside of that bubble of what you follow or who you connect with and what they talk about, you don't learn what else is happening in the world. And perspective, once you have that empathy with someone, once you've connected with someone and you see the situation, or you feel what they're experiencing, then your entire world opens up to that issue. But if you're ignorant to it and it's not necessarily on purpose, it's very hard to connect with it. So how can we use the tools available to us right now, or the resources, to change that? How can we create more awareness? If there is someone passionate and they're really resonating with what you're saying, what can they do right now within their communities to help progress this forward and educate more people about these issues?
I would say the first and most important thing ever is to educate yourself. So go and read up as much as you can about human rights, about why they're important. Try to understand what systemic injustice is and how it actually plays out in the world today, because it's super powerful in the world today, but they've just gotten a lot better at hiding it. So we really need to educate ourselves first to understand what is going on in the world realistically. What are people trying to hide from me? And who can I speak to who actually experiences this human rights violation regularly, so I can hear from people who suffer the most. After you've educated yourself, go out there and speak to as many people as possible. Become an everyday activist. Use your social media if you want to. Go out and post and tweet and do what you need to do. But I would also hugely say, go into communities. Go and find people who do not have access to things like social media. I know that we're from different countries and our contexts are slightly different, but in South Africa, for example, most people in our townships don't have access to the news. Most people don't have electricity, so how are they supposed to watch the news and things like that? So for them, the president making an announcement, hey guys, COVID's here, we have to go on lockdown. None of those people access that information. So we had to go old school, and we had to print pieces of paper and go out and knock on every door and try to explain to people what this was and why they had to stay indoors. So we must also recognize that not everyone has the same access to information. So just by going out there and educating people, you are doing an incredible thing. So I would say that's always the first thing I always say is educate yourself and then try to educate others, because we can't fight this if we don't know what it is. And then, secondly, be an everyday activist in your life. So guys, when you're chatting with your friends and they go, oh yeah, that chick, you need to stop them and be like, hey, why did you use that term to define a girl? She's not a chick, she's a human being. And when you call her something other than a human being, it gives you permission to treat her as something other than a human being, which isn't okay. And women, same thing. Terms we use, bias, all these words that we use, they reinforce stereotypes and they reinforce behaviors that violate human rights. So look out for your words, call out the people around you. Do it with love, though. I always say, don't go up to someone and be like, ah, because that's not going to work. But go up to someone and be like, listen, I love you, and like, I really want you to do better. Or like, did you know that wasn't a cool thing to say? And I think, maybe next time try not to say that. Because the only way we're all going to grow is if we do it together and we hold each other accountable. So that's kind of your immediate circle, your family, your friends. And then if you really want to get like into the real, the heavy stuff, first off, you can go to the Justice Day's website. We have a lot of information there on it, and on our social media. But find out who your local leaders are. Find out what the promises that have been made to your people. And if they haven't been fulfilled, I want you to nag that leader until they curse the day you were born. The amount of like ward councillors and leaders that I call multiple times a day, and I'll be like, hi, it's me again. Hi, it's me again. Even though you blocked my number, I will use a different number, or I'll send you mass letters, or I will go to your door, knock on the door and be like, do you know that we voted you into power, which ultimately means you work for us. We do not work for you. You have a responsibility to, for example, make sure this community has access to water, or make sure that enforced disappearances aren't happening, or to make sure that sexism is being addressed. And if you're not doing this, we will remove you, because as the people, we actually do have the power to do that if you live in a democratic country. So I would say hold your leaders accountable. Don't be afraid. They will make you think like you work for them, but actually it's the other way around. They work for us. They need to be accountable to us, and they won't be accountable unless we enforce that. So yeah, find out what your countries have promised at a grassroots level, but also you can do an international level. Each country makes promises to United Nations, for example, and you can read up on that. You can go to what is it called? UPR Watch, or all these different websites that document the promises that countries make to the UN. And you can go to your leaders and say, look, you've promised this, and you haven't done anything. What are we going to do about it? And the term there, which was really important, is because they can't do it alone, we can't do it alone. We have to do it together.
Well, and the thing is, all of that information actually is available. The United Nations governments, they actually have to, like, there's a lot that they have to publish online, like they're published online, like their meeting notes, or they're all accessible. Like you can go and see the meeting notes from the ECOSOC forum or the high level political forum, and read about those things and the commitments, and like everything is documented like that. But you have to take the initiative to do that and learn about it. And I think, to your point, what you said at the beginning of the conversation is, a lot of it is, it's not like it's purposely hidden, but there's not a giant spotlight on it either. It's not like directing you to and be like, here, read this. It's there for people to passively come across, unless you intentionally are looking for it.
I would go as far to say is that, certain people do hide it. And I think it's because, think about it, even accessing a website, that's such a privileged thing. That's something that, a lot of people in this world do not have access to, or to know how to read or write. So having access to this information needs to be something that's accessible to everyone. And if it's not accessible to everyone, then that's our first human rights campaign. Then we can all get together and be like, how do we make all this mumbo jumbo make sense for the everyday person? How do I help you to understand that you are valued and you deserve dignity and respect and your human rights? How do I get you to understand that in a way that's in your language, to the education level where you'll understand it? That's one of the most important things. And until every single person on this planet they will have that opportunity, then I still think we have a lot of work to do. But I do think that's a really cool first campaign if anyone wants to jump on that. I know a lot of people try to make that happen, so that's a really cool campaign to do.
Yes. Well, and also to your point of making sure you connect with those with lived experiences to the challenge you're trying to solve. Instead, you can read about it and you can learn about it and watch media and these things, but unless you speak to someone who is in it and experience it, you won't know. Like if you ask a scholar, how do you communicate this to someone who doesn't read? Like, they're not going to come up with a solution. You need to speak to someone who doesn't read to understand what language or what communication tool is the best means to communicate that information. And I think that's sometimes lost a lot. When we go to policy roundtables, conferences, events, you do see the same faces, but also the same types of individuals there. And oftentimes we're sitting behind closed doors talking about how to solve a problem that none of us are experiencing. And I think that needs to change. You need to have people with the lived experiences who are in it to be able to even just guide the way of where the solutions are. Even if you have the purest intent of wanting to solve that problem and you don't personally experience it, which you can, but unless you are connecting with someone who's living it, you're not going to be as informed of what direction you need to take. You'll have unintentional oversights as well in terms of communications and different things. I've personally found that.
No, I think that's really true. And I think if anyone's trying to address an issue that they haven't experienced, if they don't have someone, and actually the majority of their team being people who either have experienced it or are experiencing it now, then you're on a failed mission there. Because, I mean, an example of this, we had this this group of people, and they were like, oh yeah, we're experts in like development, and they threw words around like sustainability, and we were like, okay, yeah, but what is this actually? Like you keep talking but you're not actually saying anything. And they went to this one township, and they were like, you know what the problem is? The reason why men keep beating up all these women is because they don't have anywhere to like vent their energy. So we're going to build outdoor gyms, and then all the guys can come and do the gyms. And like, we've done so much research in this in like Europe and America, and like, this is totally going to work. And they did it. And then they called us and they were like, oh, would we come for the opening ceremony? And we were like, But the next morning, we all arrived with the press, and they had their weird big scissor thing, and they wanted to cut this ribbon. But when they got there, the entire outdoor gym was gone, and they were like, "What the heck happened?" And then we looked around and we realized that all the pieces of the gym, the people had just disassembled it and put it into their shacks, into their homes to help hold up their houses. And those people immediately were like, "Oh, the people of South Africa are so ungrateful. They don't know what they're doing." And our response to them was, well, when you arrived in our country, did you at any stage go to those people in that community and actually ask them, what is it that you need? You tell us what you need, because you are the experts as to what your needs are. And they didn't do that because they thought they knew better. And as a result, that project completely failed. Although some people got some good building materials for their homes. But if they had just asked that question, some incredible change could have happened and a great relationship could have been formed. So I think, I always give it as a warning to people. Don't think you have all the answers. I've been running this organization for many years. I've been working in the NGO sector for many years. I have multiple degrees and qualifications, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert, and it doesn't mean that I know everything.
Well, I want taking your concept of everyday activist. I want to add to that and add everyday expert to that. Look for the everyday experts in the challenge that you're trying to solve. The ones who, like you said, are on the ground and can tell you what they need, as opposed to you making assumptions and deciding what they need for them. I think that's really powerful. With that in mind, because you have been doing your work for a long time now, one of the things that I always like to when my mentor always tells me that another word for mistake is experience. And when I reflect on my own entrepreneurship journey, I find a lot of the challenges that I thought were mistakes or things that were at the time didn't go the way I wanted them to, looking back now, have been like key points where I've learned the most or has really shaped where I am now, where I wouldn't have gained the success or built the impact that I wanted in the same way if it hadn't been for those experiences. But is there a moment in your journey that comes to mind where it didn't go so great, but now looking back, has you've learned from it or it shaped your experience?
Yeah, so many. So many mistakes. And I'm super thankful that I learned from them, or someone said, Jessica, sit down and learn from this. But I would say the biggest mistake I ever made was I tried to take on too much myself, and I tried to protect my team from a lot of the really intense stuff. So we see a lot of trauma, we see a lot of death, we see a lot of rape, we see a lot of like really, really hectic stuff. And it affects you, especially at a mental health level. So for a very long time, I tried to shield my team as much from that as possible, and I took on way too much. And I ended up, I think I was like in the middle of Sierra Leone, and we were like doing some peace negotiations or something. And it was almost like something like clicked, and I had a severe mental health breakdown. And I literally, like, it was the most incredible experience ever, but also one of the most horrible experiences of my life. But it really pushed me to, as soon as I had my 5 flights and 1 boat back to South Africa, I landed and I like went straight to doctors, and I was like, okay, we need to do something about this. So I was super blessed that I had, doctors who were able to help me, and, we have regular, all our team now, we have weekly counseling, we have daily debriefs. Those who need medication are on medication, but we really try and do everything we can to protect ourselves and to look after our mental health. So that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made, but I'm so grateful for it, because I don't think I had a lot of compassion towards people who experienced mental health issues before. And this really helped me to become more understanding as a person and more compassionate as a person, I hope. But also it really, it taught me that, that if I work so hard that I destroy myself, I'm not going to be of any use to anyone else. And I do believe that's why I'm here. I'm here because someone decided up there in the sky that I need to do whatever I can to help people. And I almost screwed that up by not looking after myself. So that was the biggest thing, is to when I'm tired, I let myself sleep. When I, need rest, I will do something I enjoy doing. And I 100% draw that into the culture of our organization. If someone just looks like they're frowning, I send them home on a mental health day. Because we have to protect ourselves, and we have to look after our mental health, because, again, if we're serious about helping and empowering other people's lives, we need to be at our best in order to serve them the best. So that was one of the biggest kind of mistakes of mine, but I'm super thankful it happened.
I really resonate with that on so many levels. I've experienced similar, obviously different contexts, but very similar, where I've burnt myself out more than one occasion. And when you were speaking about it, though, it did bring it up, and because I was connecting a lot with your experiences about shielding your team, about taking it all on yourself, overworking yourself. And I wonder if this is actually shared among founders and entrepreneurs, and this could be maybe more might resonate with this, where when you are a service, when you're a social entrepreneur, you want to be a service to others, and you keep giving. I personally struggled with having the same expectations for myself, in the sense of everyone else has weekends, everyone else works their 8-hour days or whatever it is, and for me, I always had this thing of I keep giving, but I'm not entitled to a weekend or sleep or anything. It's I don't know, you just you don't feel, it's not like you feel superhuman, it's just that you never think of yourself. You just keep thinking of giving to others and forget to allow yourself to receive rest, allow yourself to receive time, to smile, to do something that's not work and play for once. But I don't know, that's something that I've personally been struggling with a lot. And when you were explaining that, it definitely resonated and struck a chord with me. Did you feel any of that?
No, definitely. I think founders and CEOs and executive directors or people in like, I don't know, it's a very lonely place to be. And I think that that's why it's so important to surround yourself with a tribe, surround yourself with people that love you and people that you love and people who can tell when you're not okay, so they force you to take breaks. And that's really been a blessing for me. But I had to change the way that I thought about it, because I think before I would kind of be like, I can't rest because my brothers and sisters are literally being raped and murdered and starving literally down my road. So how can I rest when this is happening? But I had to change the way I thought about it, because actually when I was going out there exhausted, traumatized, I was of absolutely no use to anyone. And I was making mistakes. I was not thinking things through. And I had to actually say to myself, the best thing for my people is for me to be at my best. And when I'm not at my best, I'm failing them. So I really had to stop and breathe and make sure that I was at 100% so that I can serve people 100%. So that once I kind of changed my thinking in terms of that, it was a lot easier to rest. And now when I'm, just really want to go home and watch my Korean dramas and eat popcorn, I will do that because if it makes me in the good mindset to be able to start again tomorrow, then then it's just as important as doing that financial report or meeting my funders or meeting a member of parliament or whatever the case is. It's just as important.
Whatever you need to refuel, right? Like it's just like you're refueling a car. You can't just keep, if you're running out of gas, you can't just keep going. It's going to ruin the car. You got to take a break, refuel, whatever that is, whether it's Netflix, whether it's creativity, whatever kind of thing is, whether it's even just sleep. I really
do what you need to do.
Yes.
And I think also, like, one other thing I had to realize, which was also a really good lesson for me, is that you can't do everything. And if you do everything, you're actually you're taking up opportunities which other people could be taking to also make a difference. So I had to find it like in myself to believe and trust that there are other people out there doing incredible work. And there are people, there are huge amounts of people out there doing incredible work. So when I sleep, I sleep knowing that there are other people out there. And I think that also really helps. So don't think that you're going to change the world. Don't think that you on your two shoulders are responsible for everything. You're not, but you're one of the people who've been, blessed to have woken up one day and been like, I've got to do something. That's a blessing. But many other people have it as well. So don't feel like you're alone, and don't feel like this is all your responsibility. You play your part, everyone plays their part, and eventually the whole world will be covered.
Finding your light early on is definitely a blessing. One of my more fun questions for you is, and I think based on kind of this conversation, I have an intuition on what you're going to say, but if you had a superpower and you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
How we just like, oh my golly goodness. I mean, obviously I would love to have a world that didn't have poverty and inequality and injustice. That would be incredible. But yeah, I mean, I think I would, it's a hard one, but I don't know. I think we as humans have lost the ability to love without condition, and I think that that's something we need to get better at. So my superpower would be like, hey, you need to love more, and hey, you need to accept love more, and like stuff like that.
Unconditional love, just to bless everyone. I love that.
People who are loved will go out and love. And so I think that if we all know that there's someone out there who cares for us, I think it helps us to become better people.
Well, yeah, when with love, then comes empathy, compassion, and all the other things that you need to solve the issues you're passionate about. And also the superpower thing, though, really touches on your point you had right before, too, is a superhero isn't really cool if they do, well, I guess they are cool if they do everything, but they don't really have like a special superpower name or anything. Like the Hulk is strength, Spider-Man has the spider thing. Like everyone has their superpower. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really good way to focus on is what is your superpower? What is that North Star for you that is going to be your focus, and let other superheroes do the other things. And together you could be a superhero team, but you need to focus on your power. And I think
find that so funny because like we're called the Justice Desk, and our team, we call ourselves the Justice League, like behind closed doors, which we
Oh my
find
gosh.
very funny. And we've like assigned each other members of the Justice League, and whenever we just have a really bad day, our office is like the weirdest place. There'll always be like soccer or tennis or like crazy music. There's like people walk in and they're like, what is happening? And there'll be people dressed up as superheroes. Actually, it's so funny. But yeah, it just keeps us laughing. But I love that because yeah, everyone together will all form the Justice League.
I love it. And then my final question for you, because we talked about always the importance of surrounding yourself with a positive support network, but also learning and continuing to kind of grow that team. So if we were to play a game of mentor matchmaker, name 3 people that you would like to exchange ideas with or learn from? They can be dead or alive.
Nelson Mandela. Definitely. Can I say him times 3? Nelson Mandela is my number 1 always.
Yeah.
I don't know, number 2 and 3. I don't see I feel like everyone is super awesome, and I feel like people who've gone through incredible trauma and incredible difficulties and have overcome it like are such legends to me. So really anyone I meet, I love hearing people's stories, and I love knowing how they tick and how they get up every day. So as long as someone's willing to share anything with me, I'd be willing to share anything with them. But yeah, definitely Tata Madiba. I think it's mostly because I just miss him so much. And I feel like he'd be proud of what we're trying to do right now in our country. Yeah, maybe it's very like generic, but Mother Teresa, because I thought she was just like crazy. I was like, oh, she just I've worked with a lot of sisters and things, and I'm just like, yo, you ladies are at a whole other level. So I would love to chat to her and find out like what was going on in her mind. Yeah, I don't know. Young people. I feel like also like any young person, I'm like, let's chat.
Well, I find whenever you meet any young change makers, they definitely, if you're having a bad day, I always say just talk to young change makers, and it just brings new light to you. Is there anyone right now that in our current world that would be helpful, if you like someone that you want to connect with that would help advance your mission or anything? I always like to have opportunities like that, because once you put it out in the universe, you know, it can conspire for you. Someone who might listen to this might know someone. So is there anyone that would actually help you move your vision forward?
Okay. I think why I couldn't answer it in the first place is because I'm super blessed to have really cool people who are my mentors and, you know, guide me a lot. But when it comes to like the Justice Desk, so like our bigger mission, we are on a 5-year journey to building an entire village, and it's called Ilaleni, and it's literally an entire village that has schools and homes for orphans and HIV centers and mental health support centers and HIV testing clinics and upskilling centers and animal assisted therapy and agricultural programs. Like it's literally this incredible massive village, and it's going to be this kind of beacon of human rights on our continent and in our world, where people from all around the world can come to South Africa and be trained to be human rights defenders and go back to their countries and try to do awesome, incredible work. So right now, my kind of biggest search is to find someone of more kind of the business-minded side of things, who wants to, you know, leave this earth knowing that they've left this incredible place for future generations. So if anyone like heard that and like feels like there's life in that and feels like it's something that they're being called to help out with and be a part of, we're always looking for people to join the tribe. We're always looking for people who just land on our doorstep, because every one of them have helped expand the Justice Desk to reach even more people. So yeah, that's our next big thing, is to make sure the village is built, and it's built properly, and it's of absolute service to vulnerable people. I think that's kind of the big thing. So any business-minded person, or if you're a mazillionaire and you just want to give me money, I'd appreciate that too.
That's such a powerful project. Oh my gosh. Well, you heard it. If you know anyone, or even know someone who might know someone, we're all connected. Definitely, please, we'll make sure to link Jessica's information with this episode, as well as you can go to the Justice Desk website, justicedesk.org, or comment below, and we'll make sure to connect those dots. Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate your time and your energy and just the work you're doing for the world. You're making such an incredible difference in the lives of people every day, and I'm just really grateful to know you and be inspired by you and learn from you. You teach me things every time I have a call with you, and I think we can all do that. If we all start to educate each other, like you said, we can all find our superpowers and make the world a better place.
Thanks for having me. This is a really cool platform. I'm glad you're doing this. This is very cool. So yeah, no, thanks for having me. I love it when powerful women do things with powerful women.
Thank you, Jessica, for joining us on MyEffect today. And for our listeners, if you resonated with what Jessica has shared in this podcast, make sure to give this episode a like. Share it with those in your community that need to learn about the inspirational work that Jessica's doing with the Justice Desk. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And more importantly, join me and Jessica with MyEffect in taking action for human rights and other causes you're passionate about in your community. Because remember, in order to create a better world tomorrow, we need to start by taking action today.